Hello and welcome to this video on the Octaves VCO from Befaco. They say it's a harsh and funky take on an additive oscillator. So let's check out what's to come. This video is sponsored by Befaco, and Befaco say pile up your multiplications and get a lo-fi retro wall of square sound. And that's very much what's happening here. This is their take on an additive oscillator. It's an analog triangle core VCO, but we get 6 octaves of square waves. And jumping straight into the features, this is 12 HP. We have 2 volt per octave controls, so we can use one to transpose the other and to mix different pitch signals together. We have an octave control, and then a tune control and a range for that tune. The range can be full range, an octave or a semitone, so between them you've lots of control for pitch. We have a global PWM here, with PWM input and attenuator for that CV or audio, and a global PWM control. Now starting with the triangle core here, this uses frequency doublers to double the frequency to multiply up the frequencies of the waveforms, and then it uses comparators to derive square waves that we can then pulse width modulate. Each square wave here has a level control and a CV input, so we have 6 VCAs here to control their levels, and there's an individual output. Outputs mix and sum from the left, so if we were to take the 6th output here with nothing patched, we'd get a blend of all of them, or we could come out of 2, where we'd get 1 and 2, and then say 5, where we'd get 3, 4 and 5, and 6 by itself. Basically anything unpatched from the left of a socket is mixed in via the CV and manual controls. So having run through the features, let's start by listening to the Octaves VCO. So starting with a single square here, we can pulse width modulate, and as we work our way across, that gives you a quick idea of the sound here. There's lots of patches in this video exploring this. They're on screen and the timing index is down below if you'd like to skip around. So without further ado, let's dive in. So here's one of my favourite things to do with the Octaves VCO, and that's using odd numbered pattern lengths. You could use an odd numbered clock divider or a sequencer with different pattern lengths for polymetric patterns, and using those to envelope in the different harmonics while a nice sequence plays. This gets really interesting when we add these extra octaves. So this is then 3 steps. You can think of it as a divide 3 of the clock. This is 5. 7. 9. And 11. And these are 6 envelopes. Firing across these 6 VCAs. So my bass layer fires on every 16th note, then once every 3, every 5, every 7, 9 and 11. We fire in decay envelopes to modulate the level. And this great kind of chiptune, funky moving octave thing. Some PWM. huge rich sound. Works really well with the filter there. So I'll just jam around. So here's the sound with the Octaves VCO with 2 bits of self-patching, and I'm coming out into an external filter just off screen, and some effects. But let's listen to this just dry at the output. We're listening to the first output, but as we sum from left to right, the unpatched 2nd and 3rd octaves are mixing with the 4th, and the 2nd, 3rd and 4th octaves here are fading up and down with different LFOs. That's this green trace here. This has been patched back to modulate the level of the 1st octave. So amplitude modulation of the 1st octave from a modulating set of 2nd, 3rd and 4th octaves here. And it's already a really interesting tone, but to add to this, I'm taking the 6th output, going through the Pony VCF for a little bit of filtering and VCA modulation, and then coming into PWM. And you can see in here, as PWM affects everything, we're introducing this strong, crispy top end, adding in my Volt Proctive sequence, bringing down my filter with some envelope modulating the filter. And this almost sounds digital because it's so stable. All the octaves are derived from the core of the oscillator. There's no drift, there's no kind of analogness to that top end. We get this really crisp, clear, interesting, almost digital tone. So blended modulated mixes of the 2nd, 3rd and 4th octaves modulating the level of the 1st, and then the 6th output patched through some filtering and VCA to pulsive modulate everything on the module. So here I have a really big, wide stereo drone that I think really captures the sound of the Octaves VCO really well. Now lots and lots of square waves are quite bright. I typically low pass filter this type of patch, but I've left it wide open so you can hear the raw sound. As the mixing here normalizes from the left, the 2nd output, green cable and green trace, is a mixture of the 1st and 2nd octave. And each of these octaves, these CV inputs, has an LFO at a different rate to fade in and out the volume of the octave of square wave. And you can see the effect that has there on the green trace. Now pan to the left in my mix, this blue trace and blue cable, which is outputs 3 and 4. And then pan to the right, the 6th output here, which is 5 and 6 mixed together. As I bring these all in the mix, I'm modulating PWM with an LFO. Affects all of these square waves here. Bringing the effects back in, playing the keyboard again. here we're looking at audio rate pulse width modulation. This is the Octaves VCO, 6th output here, so they're all summing to this output, into the Pony VCF with an envelope to the filter cutoff, coming into my mixer against these drums. And the drums are saturated in the stereo strip. Now opening up the filter, we'll remove the pulse width modulation. I have audio rate modulation coming from the Pony VCO here. There's lots of really ripping tones. We can really emphasize these different octaves, and you can get some really super noisy textures. So here we'll look at the hard sync that's built into the Octaves VCO. We're listening to the output from the Octaves VCO into the Pony VCF, just with the filter engaged, with a couple of envelopes modulating filter cutoff. Now I have an LFO to volt per octave on the Octaves VCO, giving this syncing, changing sync tone. And removing that, coming into the hard sync, I have the output of the 1U Pony VCO, and this is volt per octave sequenced. Without the sequence to the Pony VCO, let's add that back in, and sweeping the tuning, we're getting these differing sync tones, and this is still filtered through the Pony VCF here. What becomes interesting is not just using an LFO to sweep the pitch, but adding in these upper octaves. Now approaching this a little bit differently. Now we have a static Pony VCO coming into sync here, and the sequence is coming into the Octaves VCO. And because our sync source, the Pony VCO, is static, we have this droning static tone, but the pitches and those sync tones changing based on the incoming volt per octave sequence. So here's what I think is fair to say, a very standard kind of rudimentary synth voice. And rather than looking at the Octaves VCO here as a kind of root octave and then 5 octaves higher, I've come to the 3rd octave and I'm taking this as my root tuning and seeing the ones to the left as sub-octaves. On these red cables here, this is panned all the way hard left. We have our 1st octave, and then 1 octave lower, the 2nd octave. Again, I'm treating the 3rd as the kind of core root here on these blue cables, panned all the way right. So together, hard right 2nd octave, hard left 1st octave. And these have their own level envelopes. I've just opened their decays there, let's close them back down. So green cables, 3rd octave, our root sequence. PWM affecting everything. Let's add 1 octave lower panned right with a different envelope rhythm. And then hard left, playing quarter notes, again, so a different envelope, different rhythm. And then as we've got another 3 octaves here to play with, I'm taking out the 6th octave output, which will blend 4, 5 and 6 here that aren't patched, and sending that to a reverb. It's coming into the Pony VCF as a filter and VCA, so like the other voices, has a filter and a VCA. And this is just another little accent on top. There's some delay as well here. So delay on, our root sequence, higher accent, and 2 subs hard left and right. So with different rhythms from my sequencer, different envelopes to onboard VCAs and external filters. So here I'm using the Octaves VCO for some noisy FM percussion. Now we don't have FM inputs, but a volt per octave input is an exponentially tracking pitch input, and that's what an exponential FM would do on another, say, analog oscillator. So I'm using it here with an audio source from an oscillator for some FM of the Octaves VCO. Now losing my drums and effects. Now here's the first out. Let's open the envelope a bit too. And I have the Pony VCO coming into an attenuator here, then into the volt per octave input on the Octaves VCO. Turning up the modulation level. We have these gritty, noisy FM tones that when we add offset to them, we can find some really full-on metallic, unstable tones. Here's the 6th output with this VCA and envelope. Bit of reverb on this one. And on this one we have some delay. So together. It's a really full-on sound that, as I say, is great for percussion. Thinking of the Octaves VCO as an additive synthesizer, I really like the idea of different harmonics or simply different octaves each time a note is played. Every time I press a note on an external keyboard, 6 new random values control the 6 levels of the 6 square wave octaves. That mix comes through the Pony VCF, where this envelope just opens and closes the sound. So as I press the same key over and over again, now if I set up an arpeggiator and a shorter envelope and just hold down a single key, you can really hear this bounce around on a single note. And this becomes even more fun if I play chords, so I'll play a few chords here with the arpeggiator on. So here I was going to try and really slow down the Octaves VCO and create some staircase, pyramid, castle-like waves as a kind of pattern generator for modulation. I'm not getting any lower than the lowest tuning I can get by patching in negative voltages, so this is as slow as we can make this go. Full range all the way left, and the octave switch all the way down. And I'm using the output here to modulate the FM of another oscillator. And while this kind of sounds like an annoying alarm, I found all these kind of ringing telephone-like sounds quite interesting. And it's a good way to look at the waves and to understand what these different octaves are doing. So if you've got this far in the video, go drop a hard sync in the comments. Hit like and subscribe and support my work on patreon.com/DivKid. Thanks to those that do. Let's chat down in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Bye.